those who are dear to us gather near to us once more.
Good afternoon. What is up, Alisal? We're so happy to see you. If you tuned in a little early for the Christmas music and you appreciate old-time Christmas music like me, hooray! If you hate Christmas music, then that just makes me laugh because we have somebody in our office here who shall remain nameless who hates it, and it's just fun to torture them with this music. So today we will be talking about Lightspeed Classroom. I kind of spammed you guys this week. So can you believe it's December already? I think there are people who are like, yay, 2020 is almost over, or Christmas is coming, or whatever it is. But also there's some of us who are kind of like this. Actually, I can't believe it's December already, and are kind of having a tantrum in your heart. And we see you people too, so that's fine. No matter where you are on the spectrum of how the time has gone. March seems like 6 years ago, but there you go. So we have a programming change. So normally this being the first Friday of December would be the Ed Services live stream Q&A. That's being moved to the 18th because this is a really important live stream today. We'll be rolling out a new foundational remote instruction tool, Lightspeed Classroom, that will be should be starting on Monday, the 7th. So it was just really important that we rearrange the schedule. But also just a reminder that live stream Q&A will be the last live stream of 2020. So get your questions ready. Dr. Hernandez, who usually gets the lion's share of the question, is waiting with bated breath. Quick reminder, all help requests for EdTech support can go to edtech@alisal.org. Also, George and Celia hold the open office hours. You can go to bit.ly/AlisalHelp. Remember, it is case sensitive. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about Lightspeed Classroom. The whole department will be working, and we have a guest with us, Billy Long, who's our rep from Lightspeed. So we're just going to go ahead and take it away. You guys have the link in your email for the Q&A as they come. Yep, and we're just going to go ahead and get going. So today's session is about Lightspeed Classroom. So you may have heard of Lightspeed before. It is our web filter. So anytime you or your kids are going to a website and it's blocked and you see that gray screen with the blue bar, sometimes it's orange, I think it depends on the category, that's Lightspeed. So this system works hand in hand with that system and a couple of others. It's really well integrated, and it's going to help us with a need that we've had and kind of been wrestling with since we started. So here's a look at today's agenda. I'm going to talk about what Lightspeed Classroom is and why we're using it, how to access it. We're going to walk you through the interface, working with whole class versus working with individual students. And we'll have a live demo and some Q&A as we normally go. So why use Lightspeed Classroom? So the question becomes, what need are we trying to meet? So here's sort of like, we're trying to meet our classroom management need, right? So I'm not the guy who puts up a bunch of text and then says, I'm not going to read the slide to you. I put all the text up, I'm going to read it. So there you go. Classroom management is a system of routines and techniques teachers use to keep students supported, focused, and engaged in what they're doing in class. Teachers all do it a different way, but one common good thing that good classroom managers do is they walk around the room, they check in with students, see how kids are going individually, provide help as needed. Not really possible during remote instruction. And especially if we teach primary grades, but honestly, probably every age group, kids aren't always very good at describing what they're seeing on their screen and what they need help with. So it helps us in the class. We would just look at a kid's computer, their Chromebook, but we don't really have that ability up till now. So digital classroom management is the same as what I've said above. It's just on the internet through a screen. So the Alisal School District Lightspeed digital classroom management solution is going to be called Lightspeed Classroom. You will see it abbreviated LS Classroom to distinguish it from Google Classroom. But I would really like to make this point. It's primarily viewed by the district as a guidance and support tool. with discipline and punishment being secondary. Now, there's a lot of people, especially non-educators, who think classroom management means control the children and discipline the children. And we know that controlling and disciplining children is not an effective way to build relationships, and it's not an effective way to build engaged learners. So we would like to make that very clear. Also, towards the end of this live stream, when I'm not talking, and your principals have already seen this, but towards the end of this live stream, you will receive an email with the teacher guidelines, the district level teacher guidelines for how to and how not to use Lightspeed Classroom. Not the how to, on the screen, where do I click sort of stuff, but the kinds of guidelines from people in the field. So before we proceed, the EdTech liaisons, the ETLs, have been piloting this for, I think, 3 weeks now. And those teacher guidelines are like 80% written by them. So our guidelines are written by teachers in the field. We felt it was very important that we got that classroom voice. So you'll have 4 sections. It'll have must-dos, may-dos, must-not-dos, and then probably shouldn't, but there's a little gray area and there might be circumstances where you do. So let's move forward, and George is going to take over on the next section. Well, at the start of the next section, about accessing Lightspeed Classroom. So how do you get to it? So as soon as George is ready, he can go ahead and take over the screen.
Give me a second, Josh. I know I was supposed to be ready here, and then I didn't, right? Sorry, I apologize for that. Let's share now. There you go. All right. Here we go. And let's go ahead and get started. So actually, accessing the Lightspeed Classroom is it's actually a pretty simple process. You go ahead and we start right from the portal. There's no additional apps that you need to install as a teacher. There's no additional setup by you. Everything's been done by IT here. It's already on all of our students' Chromebooks, and all you need to do is click on the start icon in your portal to access it. So really simple use. You should see this hopefully on Monday morning. You should have it in your classroom, and this is what our Lightspeed Classroom icon looks like. So we're going to go ahead and move on to who has access.
Okay, so here's where I'm gonna pop up again. So it's interesting when we explain this to the ETLs, and we had a focus group of principals that we walked this through. We kept finding can we go back a slide, George? We kept finding an explanation point that was a little sticky, so we're going to try to say this as clearly as possible. So you see that Google Classroom symbol there, so that is how Lightspeed Classroom is rostered. Basically, when you go into your Lightspeed Classroom interface, you go to the portal, you find the interface, you will find a drop-down of classes based on Google Classroom. Everyone who's the teacher in that Google Classroom or the co-teacher can use Lightspeed Classroom to monitor the activity of the students in that Google Classroom. Now let's look at that second white bullet point. It does not matter if you use Google Classroom as long as it is set up. So just because the rostering is done with Google Classroom doesn't mean it has anything to do with your use of Google Classroom. Now you might say, but I don't remember setting up a Google Classroom. That's right. But just as you did not have to set up your own Seesaw classrooms this year, you didn't have to set up your own Google Classrooms this year. Because we used a different system, we automatically set them up. They're based on PowerSchool. So how are these classes created? Through Google Classroom, just the roster. Who has access? Anyone who's the teacher or co-teacher in that class can see the student screens. Now, we also like to be very, very clear. This does not work on adult computers. For it to work, we would have to install something on machines. The district has no interest in doing that. And even if we did do it, would have to be, we would work through ATA and CSEA before we did that. That is the last thing I've been told about this. Lastly, there is no district-wide access to the district office staff or the IT department. So you can't put in a help ticket or call us and say, hey, can you look in my classroom my Lightspeed Classroom to see blah, blah, blah. No, we can't. We physically do not have access, or I guess digitally do not have access. So there's no master control. There's no master dashboard where we can see every student screen. It is really, and honestly, that's for privacy and that's for control. So no, at the DO level or the IT department, we can't be looking over the digital shoulder of the students. That's for the teacher and the co-teachers, which is usually the principal, possibly the AP and the academic coach. Just wanted to make that clear. Carry on, George.
Thank you, Josh. And so we're going to go ahead and get right into, you know, what is the interface? What is Lightspeed and what does it look like? What is the interface for it? So when you launch a Lightspeed Classroom, the first thing that you will see up here will be, you know, you will select a class on here. So you want to make sure that you want to select the class that you will be starting a session for. Other settings that you have on here is there's some web rules, and we'll go into each of these a little bit more deeply as we go through the other sections, but there's some web rules on here that you can set, and you can do these before you start the session, after you start the session. You are also able to send links to students on here. Again, we'll get through these as we go down the line. And then of course the 3 dots, you should be used to that. In this case, would that be a laying down snowman, Celia? 3 dots there, you know, more settings, right? So always check it out, check out what's in there. We'll cover that a little bit later on. So the big section on here to actually, once you select your class, is to actually go ahead and start a session or schedule a Lightspeed Classroom session. Once you click on that icon there, you are going to, you will go ahead and be able to start a session in 3 easy steps. Number 1 is select your class, okay? Number 2 is optional. I told you to remember that you could do this part here. You could do this before you start the session or after you start the session. That's why I left it optional, because you may not want to use that, but we will talk about that. Step 3, you will click on this little alarm clock here to start your session. And then it's going to take you to a screen that looks like this. You will go ahead and set the session duration. You know, here are some from the drop-down menu. You can select how long your session is going to be, and you launch the session by clicking Start. Once you click into Start, you are going to get this right side of the screen. Just so you know, this was the left side of the screen, and here is the right side of the screen on here. And what you will see is here we have this in what's called heat view. By default, this is set to list view, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But right now, these are all of the students. You can see some activity here. We'll start from the top on here. One of the things that you're going to see that you don't see on here, but we'll give you an example, is insights. Insights just give you information about students and, you know, trends that are going on. So maybe it's something you need to take a look at. If something pops up in there, there's probably something that something's going on in there that you probably want to take a look at. Right now, you see that there's no insights on here for me. So that's where insights would be, and we'll talk more about those. Here is the whole class activity, right? You can actually see at a glance all of, in this case, in my version on here, we have the heat version of the settings, but you can see it in also as a list. And again, we'll show you that in a little bit. All your students are there. Down at the bottom on the left-hand, at the top right-hand side, this is where you change the view that you want to use, okay? And then down at the bottom right-hand corner here, we have what's called a heat map legend. And as you can see here, if it's blue, that would be an insight, and there isn't any insights up here right now. You would see it in blue up there, but then you see it kind of filter from white all the way to dark orange. And the more orange that you see the activity on here, the more active that these students are, you know, during the session. So again, that goes to show you, you know, why is the student so active? So you can take a look at that. And then finally, this little piece on here says show all screens. By default, we don't want to show all screens because we know that showing all screens, you know, takes more bandwidth and so forth. And you actually, when you click here, show all screens, you will get a warning that says, you know, this could slow down your computer. But when you click on that, you will get something that looks like this. So here you can see all the student screens on here, and you can see all the student screens at once. Again, remembering that the more students you have, the more bandwidth this is taking. So if you're already struggling with that, you want to make sure that you don't have that on if you don't need to. Which takes us now to working with the whole class. And Celia is going to go ahead and take over this section.
Perfect. Okay. So we're going to take a little bit of time to walk through what it's going to be like using the controls with the entire class. So there are some things that are just easier to do with everybody instead of clicking through one. And then we'll take some time to think of what the features are to work with students individually. And so if you do need to support a student individually, then there are some controls that are slightly different, some that are very similar. And so we're going to take a look at both of those. But we're going to start with working with the entire class. And so as we mentioned, George mentioned at the beginning that when you start a session, you can add rules to the browsing. And so underneath the title for your classroom, there's a section here for web rules, right? I'm going to make that a little bit bigger so you can see it. And so if you click the little caret under web rules, you're going to get options. None is that there are no restrictions, like students can go anywhere on the web, no restrictions. If you click on no browsing, it seems fairly self-explanatory, just saying that there is zero browsing. Just keeping in mind that this platform can be also used with in-person instruction. And so that option specifically, you could think of like if we were doing face-to-face in-person instruction and you just needed students to be off of their devices completely, then you might want to use that, right? No browsing. But since we're all remote right now, you may probably not be using that option very much. But it's there in case we maybe next year start to transition back into the classroom and we have that option. And the last one is custom options. And so we're going to talk about that last option a little bit. If you clicked on custom rules, you're going to get this next screen. There are two kind of options for customizing rules. So the first one is called focus mode, and it's going to be found here on the left. And in focus mode, it is very much what it sounds like, meaning that like everything kind of else is blocked except for the websites that you would write down here in the little open text box. And so it blocks everything except the things that you want students to focus on. So everything else is blocked except the things that you put here. So if I list Google Classroom, PBS Kids, and Renaissance, those are the only things that the students need to be focusing on. The kind of alternative to that is going to be Explore mode. So in Explore mode, it's going to allow all websites except the ones that you list. So you're still going to use this, the entry field down here, but except in Explore mode, the things that you list here are going to be blocked. So you can think of maybe like an assessment. If you do not want students to get into their like Google Drive because all their work is there, or Google Classroom because they have examples there, and you want those to be blocked, then you could add those and those things would be blocked. So again, those are the two options for customizing students' web browsing. Oh, I hear something. George, let me know if I need to stop because I can't see the other screen. The second option on your dashboard, right next to web rules, is send. And so if you need to send a link to everybody, right, this is again whole class, let's just do this as fast as possible instead of having first graders try to maneuver around different websites. Let me just send it to you. So you would use the second option to send a link to the whole class, and it opens a new tab, is my understanding, with whatever website you send. So it's not going to like close their Google Meet or close anything. It's just going to open a new tab and like automatically everybody's on the same page. So you would use that. And then the third option here, I'm really only attention to the first option. So it under the, what do you call it, George? Something, a snowman that's laying down? A laying down snowman. We're really just going to call attention to the screen lock. If you need to lock everybody's screens, you can use that option. And they'll get a little message just saying your teacher has locked. We aren't actually going to be able to use the second option, which is like if you wanted to share your own screen with the students, you could use that option, except that we recently figured out that it would require additional software and things that we're not going to get. And so we don't have the option to do that. But reminder that really, if we want to share a screen, we can do that straight from a Google Meet, right? I can just share it like I'm doing right now. And so just to note that you can't really do it from here. And there is a page for settings, but most of the settings are district set. And so like we already have the classes populated through Google Classroom rosters. And so again, there isn't really much in terms of like you having to set anything up with settings. You're good. And we're not really going to take much to talk about that anymore, but you probably won't need it.
Celia, before you move on really quickly, Billy, who's joining us from Lightspeed, shared that when you were limiting earlier the the content filter, that when let's say YouTube is blocked by our filter here in the district, so you could not put that in there and say allow students to go into YouTube. This does not, Explore Mode does not override our content filters by the district. So I wanted to share that piece from Billy.
That's a really good point. Thank you for pointing that out. I hadn't thought about that, but yes, it won't override anything. Thank you for that. So we've talked about how there are these things called insights right up here at the top. And so if you have any insights, they will show up here. And so, it can be difficult to have to keep an eye on 32 students at the same time. And so insights are there to help you at a glance, keep an eye on something that might be unusual. And so using, Lightspeed's AI technology, they pick up on any kind of unusual activity. It'll generate that insight. And it's a signal for you that you might want to check in with that student because they might be off task. And so you would just go ahead and click on this blue tile and it'll open up that individual student's account or information screen. So again, if you don't have any, then it should be fine. But that's what they are if you ever see those little blue boxes there. So besides that, right, like in this particular screenshot, I don't have any insights up here. And this is just an example of a class. Just to explain a little bit more how to use the interface that George kind of gave us an overview of. And so he mentioned that there are two different ways to look at your class. This first one, and it's going to default to list view when you first log on, it's what it is. It's a list of all your students. And so it's going to be this very first little icon right here on the side. You can toggle between those two, but again, it'll default. And so it'll give you a list of your classroom. It'll give you a list of which website your students are currently browsing. It'll tell you what website is most viewed. So this actually looks fairly accurate because we're all on Google Meet, right? It'll tell you how many websites have been visited. And I think this probably is one of the just because George and I have been trying it, I feel like this is probably one of the things that I would pay most attention to in list view. Because if, whatever work we're doing, I might expect students to be on 4, 5, 6 websites, sure. But when I have all of my students at 4, 5, 6 websites and little Monica is on 117 different websites, I'm going to be concerned. So I'm going to want to check in with her and see, well, what is it exactly that she's doing? Why is that sort of just paying attention to the anomaly really is helpful for me because I see it every time that I've tried it and I go in and everybody's around 8, 9, 10 and there's someone who has 100 and some and I'm like, wait, what? And so again, just looking at it at a glance, you get the insights, but you also get more detailed information in list view. That can be very helpful. If you need to pin a student, so again, if I happen to notice that little Monica is at 117 websites and I'm like, what is happening? I find out that she just maybe needs some extra monitoring. There's a way to pin students. So you would hover over their row and over here on the right-hand side, you're gonna get a little, it'll be smaller than that. I just made it a little bit bigger. But you'll get a little pin right here. If you click on it, it'll actually pin that particular student up here to the top So you'll get like an extra little row that says pinned. And then again, it's just easier access because otherwise you're going to have to scroll to keep seeing that student. And so for whatever reason you need to pin somebody, you can do that. To unpin them, you simply click the pin again, and then everything will go back to the regular list view. So the alternative to working in whole class is using the heat map view. And so again, the second option is this little, it kind of looks like grid view over here on the side. And so you get these little circles with students' names on them. You'll notice that here I do not get a list of what website they're currently on. I don't see how many, right, they have visited. And so it is less information at a glance, but as George briefly mentioned, the coloring on here, which is why it's called the heat map, gives you information about how many, not in numerical form, but by the color, I can tell that Daniel is way more active than all the other students. And so, and Natalie just is kind of in the middle there. And so I would probably want to check in with Daniel to see if he's on task. He may very well be. But again, it's just at a glance, I can kind of see that something might need my attention. If you have students that are grayed out in both list view and heat map view, just keep in mind that those are students who aren't logged on. They're absent, they weren't there, they're not on your meet. And so that's why they're gray. So you're not going to have any information on them. From this page, regardless of how you're viewing the entire class, I'm going to call attention over to the left-hand panel. And so as you're monitoring your class's activity in either view, there's this panel on the left-hand side. And so you can filter so that you don't see everybody's information at once. You may very well want to keep it at everybody, and that's okay. And so I'm just going to zoom in on the left-hand panel. Again, you're going to have the name of your class. You have the options over here, but then the filtering. If you want to see everybody in your class, make sure you've selected everyone on the left-hand side. You will see everybody. But if you want to start filtering, and I don't want to see 32 because out of those 32, 28 are doing just fine, and I really don't need to pay much attention to them. So I want to maybe pay closer attention to different students. There are different ways to do that. I'm going to actually start with the current website. So if I notice that this student there's one student who's on this website that I do not recognize and I don't really feel like they should be on that website, I can click on here. Right, so here's the list of things that they're currently browsing. If I click on here, it will filter on the right-hand side so I can see who is on that website. And again, then I can just see who needs attention. Even if it's more than one student, again, it's filtering. So if I want to filter by the website that they're currently browsing, I can do that over here. Here's another thing you should know. You can also filter by student status, which is here in the middle. So there are 3 statuses in Lightspeed Classroom. Students can either say that they're working, that they need help, or that they're done. So to clarify, that status is set by students. They're the ones who are reporting to you, the teacher, if they're working, if they need help, or if they're done. You're going to have to teach students how to do that. They probably, I'm assuming, haven't even noticed that they have the new extension in their browser. And if they have, they probably don't know what it does. And so we took the screenshot. I'll zoom in a little bit, but we took a screenshot from a student device. And so the icon for them looks like this. It's a little blue speech bubble with a little person inside. If students were to click on that, they get this drop-down menu that says My Classroom Status. They need to go in here and click either working, need help, or done. And here's another little tidbit. If you are using the web rules that we talked about earlier, those web rules will be disabled, so to speak, once students click that they're done in their status. So again, if you had them on, the web rules, For example, if you're taking an assessment or you're working on an assignment and you limit, right, the websites that students can go to, if once they mark that they're done with that assessment or assignment, those web rules are for them. So that now, since they're done with the assignment, then they're back to open browsing and they can go and do an extension activity or do their catch-up work or whatever it is. But again, just keep in mind that one, you're going to have to teach your students to get to this and how to set their status. Then you will get this information on your dashboard. So in this example, I can see that I have 11 students who are still working on their assignment. One of them needs help. So again, then I would click here so that on the right-hand side, it shows who is it that needs help. And the students who are done, they don't have the web rules anymore. Was there a question, George?
I was going to make a comment that Billy shared some insight on here. He was talking about how in this little drop down where you see the arrow, you actually have to click on the arrow for that to, you know, so you hover over and then you click on it and that'll set their status.
Thank you.
Hey, Celia, this is Billy.
What's up?
Also, for that action to take place of marking done, the little checkbox needs to be selected at the bottom of the actual web rules. There's a little checkbox at the bottom to enable that.
Gotcha.
Versus you don't want students all the time to be able to say, oh, I'm done, and then get out of the web rules if the teacher wants to hold students to that web rule. That is a teacher available option that's in that web filter rules for Explore mode and Focus mode.
Gotcha. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying in order for this status to override the web rules, you need to set that as like an option when you're setting up the web rules.
That is correct. It's a checkbox at the bottom of the web filter rules for Focus mode or Explore mode.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you. Good points. Good points. Thank you for chiming in. Otherwise, I totally would have missed that. So one of the disadvantages of like not being in the classroom and trying these things out, right? Okay. So that being said, we're going to take a quick couple of minutes before I turn it over to George again to talk about, again, after viewing whole class, monitoring whole class, if I do need to either touch bases with a student individually, or I just need to be monitoring or checking in with individual student, what are the options to do that? And so here's the example. We have your dashboard, and then and on either list view or the heat map view, if I went ahead and clicked on like a name here, if I'm like, hey, Christian, something's different about Christian, or I have an insight for Christian, or he has visited 100 websites and I want to check in with him. If I just click on his name from my list, it'll open a secondary kind of like, oh, it's not a separate window, but it'll open another inlay on the right hand side.
The word you're looking for is panel.
I'm going to say inlay.
Okay.
On the right hand side. And these are the options that you get for an individual student. You get obviously the name of the student at the top. And here's the information that you get from there. And so if you were to click on a student, you get, of course, the open tabs are down here at the bottom. So on Christian's device, he currently has 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there was a fifth one down at the bottom that I just cut off from the screenshot. These are things that he has open. The blue tabs are the ones that he's like currently on. As you can see here, like he was working on something in Google Draw, so like that's where it is. If you want to take a look at all the browsing history, again, if you happen to see that a student has 100 different websites that they visited and you're like, well, what is it exactly that they're visiting? Then you can click on browsing history and it'll give you a list of their history. If you need to send students a message, there is an option here. Well, you see those little asterisks there just to get you some more information about that. If you also want to record the student's screen, again, more information coming on that. The current view that the student sees will show up right here in the middle. If you need to close a tab, so again, if I open Christian's screen and I happen to notice that he's down here on Epic and I don't see any reason for him to be on there, or I've noticed, I'm sure some of you have seen this, especially with the younger ones. I've heard of a lot of students getting into the Google Meet more than once. Like they'll have a Google Meet with you and it's fine, but they'll have it open 2 or 3 times because they have they miss that the tab is open, and so they'll click maybe on the link again, and so then they'll have like 3 tabs with Google Meets open. And like Josh was mentioning at the beginning, for some students it's just they don't understand what you're trying to tell them to do and they don't know how to explain, and so it really would just be easier to say to a first grader, like, let me close your tab. And so to do that, you're going to just click on the little X down here to close the tab. If you want to redirect students, so if in this example, Christian is on the Google Drawing, right? He's doing his work on Google Draw, but he can't find the Google Meet now. He's like, teacher, I don't know where it went. And it's a little first grader, and I try to tell them, but they just can't figure it out. Then again, as a support, then I can go into their screen essentially and just redirect them by using the list down here of open tabs. If I just click again, so if Christian's here and I'm like, you know what, Christian, I really need you over here in Google Classroom or in Google Meet. If I go ahead and just click that tab, it will switch him over to that tab that I just clicked. So again, you can redirect, you can close, you can look at everything that's open. You get like a real-time view of what they're seeing on their screen. You have all these nifty tools, right? But let's go back to those messages. You can send students messages, yes. Caveat, so if you click on send message, you get 3 different options. As of right now, there's no way to send like custom messages. These are preset messages, and so either you're going to ask the student, do you need help? Are you done? Or you're amazing, great job. And once you send one of these messages, I added a little student view here. They're gonna get a little pop-up by their status bar down at the bottom right-hand corner. I mean, that's where it defaults to. That it just, right, it says classroom, are you done? So this is what the student will get. And then they can either click yes or no, I'm done. But they'll get like a little pop-up. But it's not meant to be like a chat feature where like I send custom messages and then the student can like write back. That's not quite what it is. But there is a way to just send, again, a little message if I happen to see that someone's being distracted or they're on something else. If I send them, hey, are you done? Because you look like you're doing something else. And they say yes, well then, okay, that's probably why they're on something else, because they're done. So you have that option. If you hover over, this is just like a zoomed in, I zoomed in on the student's active screen. So if you hover over that, you're gonna get a few more options over here. One of which I said we would come back to. So if you hover, you'll get these little icons over here. I'm gonna make them a little bit bigger so you see them. They're the same icons, but you have these 4 options. Again, this is for an individual student. I'm in Christian's account, I'm looking at his screen, I hover over his screen and I get these 4 options on the right-hand side. If you want to share a student's screen with the rest of the class, you can do that with that first option. So if he's explaining his math, if he has created some art that he wants everybody else to see, you can go ahead from this management tool, you can go ahead and share with the rest of the class. If you need to lock a student's screen, an individual student screen, you would do it from inside the student and you would click here. If you are going to unlock, that's the 3rd button. And then this is the last thing I said we would get back to. There is a record function if you need to record, in parentheses, the student screen for 10 minutes. Side note, it records for 10 minutes straight. And once you hit record, it's going to go for 10 minutes. Like there's no way to like shorten that amount of time. It's 10 minutes. And we use record in parentheses or in apostrophes because it, you know, and I can't, maybe Billy can tell us because I can't remember the like how often it does this, but it's not 10 seconds? Oh, okay.
Every 30 seconds it captures a screen.
30 seconds. So every 30 seconds, the software will take a screen capture. So it's not audio, video, like recording. They're screenshots, but you're going to get every 30 seconds for 10 minutes screenshots of the student screen. And so if you needed to get, you know, if you needed to share something that was happening on a student's screen to a parent or to an administrator, you can do that by hitting record. Again, it'll take screenshots, but it's not recording like live video. There's no sound to them. They're screenshots. Once you do that, let's say that I needed to record something and I hit record. Once you have a recording for a student, you're going to find it up here next to send messages. There's this little tab for recordings. So once you do have a recording, they will live here. And here's what they kind of look like. You're going to get a screenshot viewer because, again, the recordings are screenshots. If you need to download a screenshot, again, if like something that's happening on the screen needs to be shared with somebody else, you would go down here to download screenshot in the bottom left to download just individual screenshot. And then that can be emailed or sent to whoever it needs to go to. There's also a little scroll down here at the bottom to scroll through each of the screenshots if you need to. So that's the recording option. Okay, I feel like that was a lot of information, not just me. Make sure that you get your questions in. George is going to show us a couple of things just live because I don't know about you all, but sometimes it's just good to see it right in action. And while he's doing that, I'm going to be checking in on the questions. So if there are any lingering questions of like, can I see this happen? Like anything else that's come up, please write them in. I'll take a look at them so we can make sure we get to them as George takes over.
Thank you, Celia. Sorry, there was probably an echo there because I had my microphone off. I didn't hear that. So as Celia was saying, we're going to go ahead and do what we would call quasi. It's a live demo, but it's more like a quasi live demo. So I apologize for that. So as I shared earlier, where do we start? Well, you start right in your portal, and this is where you will see your Lightspeed Classroom icon on here. When you click on that icon, remember, click on the sign in with Google. You don't need to remember another username, another password. You sign in with Google, and what it'll do is it will launch live stream on here. It will launch Lightspeed Classroom here. So again, the first thing you'll need to do is you'll need to go ahead and select. I have a lot of classes on here, so you have to select the right class. You will probably not have that many. I just kind of happen to be in a lot of classes as a code teacher. Some of them are from last year and so forth. But that's once you select your class. All right, remember that you do not have to set the rules in advance. Once you select your class and you click view schedule on here, you will go ahead and select your duration of your session. So if you're having a 30-minute Google Meet, you can set it to 30 minutes. If you're having an hour, you can go ahead and set it for an hour or whatever that might be. But once you click start, questions, Celia? Yes.
Sorry, that's why I was interrupting, because I'm like, oh, this would be the perfect time to address a question in terms of, like, you know how you said, like, you could potentially get a very long list of classrooms that have generated from Google Classroom. But like, what if I just don't want like 10 different classrooms to show up in that drop-down menu? And I just like, is there a way to like clean that up a little bit?
Thank you. Yes, Ellen. Thank you. Just step in because I know I'll be going through this, and some of these questions are probably related to what what you're reading right now. So yeah. So to do that, you will see this little drop-down menu here. And if you don't want to list all these classes, you can actually manage classes. So if you click manage here, you can actually come in here and actually take a look on her. You can go ahead and hide a particular class. So for example, if I want to hide this class on here from last year, I can go ahead and click hide. And now you can hide all the classes. So if you just have one class you want to use, so it's always the class that you're going to go into, you could hide all the rest of them. And then you would go back and that class would no longer show. I hope that answered what you were talking about, Celia. But thank you. So back to actually launching a session, you will select the length of the session. If it's an hour, you will click an hour. You will click start. And then what will happen is you will get to a screen that looks something like this. Okay. Again, here's the class. Remember, here's the class that I'm using here. Here's where I have my rules on here. So again, if I wanted to go ahead and set some rules, I could come here. I could customize my rules, right? So here we go. Now, this is what Celia was pointing out earlier and that Billy was helping us out with. If you want to be able to if you want to remove those blocks once they are done so they can go anywhere on the internet, you would have to click this area, which thank you, Billy, for pointing that out. We had somehow missed that little detail that's important on there. So that little box on there, you would click on it and you would click apply. Question, Celia.
Let's see, this is from Kim. So if we're restricting, if we're using either of the custom rules, do you need to add the URL for each page?
That's actually a good question, and maybe Billy can help us with that. Yeah, and I'm guessing just that page or the domain. Maybe Billy, would you mind chiming in on that?
Yeah, so it would be the domain. So for instance, if it were Accelerated Reader, it would be Accelerated Reader's domain, or Renaissance Learning's domain. There are some caveats to this, obviously, especially like with Google and YouTube, where you have various other subdomains that fall into this as well. For instance, meet.google.com, docs.google.com, Gmail. All of those are all Google sites, but you wouldn't be able to just put google.com into the focused websites category because they all have their own sites. But it would be anything that is before a .com, .net, .org. You wouldn't have to worry about any of the slash whatever that might follow a .com, .net, .org, .edu.
Thank you for that, Billy.
So Billy, would it be fair to say that if they were trying to focus students to just the Google Meet that the teachers are teaching in that day, they would need the entire URL, not only meet.google.com. They'd need the whole one, meet.google.com / and then the 10-digit meeting code, right?
No, they would just have meet.google.com. Now, you may find specific with resources like meet.com or meet.google.com that if there's other pieces and aspects that are being pulled into those Google Meets, for instance, a slideshow, it might be necessary to have slides.google.com also allowed. Or if you're going to pull in embedded YouTube videos, it might be important to have youtube.com. Those kinds of things. There's a lot of variables that teachers will want to test with and see what works when you get into the more complicated of sites like.
Sorry, were you done, Billy? Looks like you cut out a little bit. No, we might have lost him. I know.
Yes, I was done.
Okay, great. Thank you, Billy. Any other questions before I move on, Celia, with regards to this?
Not about that, but I will just take a second to remind people that even if you created your own, like Google Classroom, or if you are using the rostered one by IT, or like that doesn't matter. Like you'll still have the rostering from either of those situations. And two, the other reminder being that you're going to start having access to Lightspeed Classroom on Monday, just to clarify.
Great, thank you, Celia. So as I was saying, so this is where you would apply the rules, the focus rule, the explore, the explore rules that Celia covered earlier. Again, don't forget about this little check mark if you want to use, the done option for students so that when they're done, they are free to, go to other websites. So don't forget to hit apply once you're done. And really important, one locked website per line. So yeah, so you want to press enter for each website. All right, so let me close that one up. We talked about a link.
So,
go ahead.
hold on, this is kind of a question for Billy. Kim, we see your questions. Don't have your stream of consciousness thoughts in the question form, please. So, Billy, if a teacher has one Google Meet and maybe a kid has another from a different teacher, if the teacher uses focus mode and uses the full domain of just their own, can they keep the kid in only that Meet for the time of the live teaching?
I am not sure about that.
Okay, that's what I thought the answer was going to be. So, Kim, some of these are going to be trial and error because Meet links, for example, are really complex. So, okie doke. Carry on, George.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Josh. So, we talked about earlier, about sending a link on here. So Sally talked about this little pop-up window that comes up if you want to open up, let's say you want to get kids to a seesaw activity. You could literally drop the link in there, and when you click send, it would open up a new tab for the students with regards to that link that you sent to them. All right, let's close this up here. We have the more options on it, which Sally already talked about. Now, I saw this question earlier, and I believe it was from Kim, talking about that she noticed that right here where we have the whole student view, that they weren't in alphabetical order. You're right, because you can filter these by name, by current browsing, most viewed, and by recent websites. So that's probably why earlier in the example, Kim, you saw it that way. So if you really want to see who's the most active, or you probably want to go ahead and click on that. Or if you want to filter it by what they're currently browsing in groups, you would click the currently browsing section. So I hadn't thought about that, but that's the way that worked, right, Billy? Because we actually didn't try that, but that's my understanding of the way that works.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So one thing that Celia talked about earlier is that, so right here on the bottom right-hand side, it says status. So this has all the students that are present. There's 10 of them. If you had any students that are not logged in, that are not currently logged in, they would show up down here as, probably those are your students that are absent or just couldn't log on for whatever reason. Yeah, okay, so there we go with that piece on here. We talked earlier about this insight. So here's an insight on here. And really, when you click on this insight on here, I could click on Zachary here and it would give me information about Zachary. What's going on with Zachary? Oh, well, here's what he is doing. Zachary has 7 tabs open. Once I get into Zachary's, their device, I can go ahead and take a look at what history does Zachary have on here, right? And you can actually take a look at previous days on here. So here you can, if you want to go take a look at yesterday or the day before yesterday, you can use this drop-down menu. Sally talked about recordings, which we don't have any right now. And then we talked about messages. So these are where messages are located. I'm trying to figure out if I am missing anything here.
There's a quick question.
Go ahead, Sally.
So in this situation, is that Leona's asking a VRB about, like if a student hops into a Google Meet several times, does the information for that student, like in terms of like browsing and everything, does that get saved for the entire session on Lightspeed, even if they're coming in and out of a Google Meet?
Yes, because they're still connected in the session of that class. Google Meet in this case is nothing more than just a web resource that they just happen to be connecting to. In this particular case, Google Meet would not be anything different than them being on turnitin.com or Seesaw or any other resource as far as the function of it in Classroom.
Speaking of, that actually made me think of another question, but where did it go?
As you're looking for it, Sally, I want to cover this because you're going to see this in this training. I want to make sure you're not confused. Up here on the right-hand corner, it says launch Zoom video. We are not using Zoom video, so you're not going to see that. We're not planning on using that. So I just want to clarify that. Okay, we have our tool that we already have for conferencing. So please ask us about that.
George, while we're clarifying, Mr. Salmon asked if George or Celia could populate the focus area in the Explorer. No, Mr. Salmon, I'm afraid not. Because this is being recorded and posted publicly, as all of our live streams are, we're not using a live classroom with our students. This is a sample classroom that Lightspeed provided for us. So this is a quasi-live. This is maybe it's an undead, like a zombie live classroom, because it's not really zombie live. But no, unfortunately, we can't do that. So again, I've already emailed you the Google Doc with the teacher guidelines. And one of the things in my email is I strongly encourage you to talk to your ETLs. Mr. Salmon, I can't remember what site you're at, but all your ETLs have played with all of these things for 3 weeks, and they can show you, and it can be a little bit more customized. We're giving you broad strokes today. Unfortunately, just for student privacy, we're not going to be in a live Alisal classroom. This is sort of a mocked up pretend classroom, just to clarify that.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. We were trying to be very careful about, which students, information we were sharing. So yeah, you're right. All right, Celia, let's hear the next question.
Actually, the explanation from Billy made me think of Lisette's question at Montebella. Lisette is asking if there's a way for students to somehow remove themselves from teacher access. And so correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but technically, yes.
So
the only way to do
I would say it this way, Celia. While on
Josh is going to chime in. Hold on.
I would say it this way, Celia. While on a district Chromebook, no, there isn't. The Chrome extension is forced. They can't pull it off of their device. If they use any device other than our district Chromebook, then we don't have access to those screens.
Right, great point. Celia, as you're looking up for the next question on here, I wanted to go ahead and show up here. Let's see if it's going to let me. Sorry, I'm going to have to get out of here and start it again here because. All right, we talked about here, the heat map on here. So again, remember that you can switch between the two views on here. And again, remember that when you choose to view everybody's screens, it will take up more bandwidth. And to hide them, you simply, where it says show all screens, you would click there, and then it would hide the screens and go back to the heat map on there. So let's check and see. It won't let me, of course. But like Celia was saying, this is, and Billy would kind of pointed out, this is probably the more useful view because it shows you the activity and exact websites where the students are at, and it doesn't hog up your bandwidth. Question, Celia, I'm ready for you.
I'm looking through these questions. We've answered a bunch of them. I think this question from Kim might just be like a recommendation, and I mean, we'll see what other people think, but Kim's question is just about, I know sometimes we do like blocks of time. And so if we, for example, as a teacher have 2 30-minute kind of blocks, we do a 30-minute math block, and then the kids have a 15-minute break, and then another half-hour block with students. And so I think, if I understand correctly, Kim's asking, is it better to do the 30 minutes of the session in Lightspeed, stop it, and then restart, or just do a full hour and a half? Again, someone feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I would recommend you just do the extended amount of time, the hour and something, because it keeps this information. It tracks per session, and so that's what I would do.
I agree with that, Celia. I think regardless of Lightspeed Classroom, I don't know. I think if you're going to break like that and students are coming back, just leave it recording. It doesn't mean anything. It actually creates a fail point where you could forget to record the second part, and anybody who's recording it can just scrub through the dead time in the middle. So there's no reason to stop it and do 2 separate ones.
And George, while we're waiting for another question, I did also want to point out, you wouldn't be able to show this on here, but from the heat map view, you can also, if there are just a handful of screens that you want to look at from that view in the heat map, you can also hover over a particular student or students and select a few screens. Maybe you don't care to see all the screens. Maybe you wanted to just see Angie, Julie, and Mark's screens. You could hover over them, and there's a small icon to be able to turn on the screen just for those 3 users, other than just opening up a particular user and seeing the screen that way as well.
Thank you, Billy. We really appreciate you kind of adding that additional insight. I know that you're going to have to get going. So, and we're about done, except for Josh, you maybe some questions for you or closing it up. Unfortunately, we want to make sure we respect your time.
We need to honor the time. It's at 2 o'clock again. So I'm going to answer a couple of quick questions. Ms. Cameron from VRB asked, will we see when an administrator or co-teacher is viewing activity? You will not at all. Because remember, this tool does not give us access to other people's computers. So no, we are really trying to respect the privacy of the adults. Ms. Favre from Chavez asked, do we no longer need to record our session since this records for us? Ms. Favre, you misunderstand how this works. So first, yes, you still need to record your sessions in Meet. Second, Lightspeed Classroom does not record what you are doing in Meet at all. What Lightspeed Classroom will record is a single student's screen for 10 minutes, and it will not record video. It records a series of stills every 30 seconds. And by stills, I mean photographs, screenshots. And we've gotten a couple of other questions about the recording. Lightspeed Classroom is not our synchronous teaching recording solution at all. You will, by the remote instruction guidelines, still need to record your synchronous instruction in Google Meet and post it in either Google Classroom or Seesaw. This does not change that. Lightspeed Classroom does not record you, the teacher. It records for brief amounts the screens of a single student at a time, but it does not record video. So hopefully that clarifies this up. There's a bunch more. There's other questions. Mr. Fernandez, just to quickly, no, the answer to your question is no, the portal doesn't do that. And Ms. Cameron said, if we use focus mode, will it block things accessible to the portal? Yes, if you do not include them in the focus list. So be very careful. Don't get so I'm going to go back to this, and this is going to be our final thought. One of the first things that all the ETLs said is, the first thing we did was we told them we had this tool, and it kept them on task. They were really good about that. The next thing is George Celia and I all noticed we got the tool a few days ahead, and we are, for various reasons, co-teachers in some people's classrooms. And what we noticed is 90% of our kids are on task anyway, even when they did not know that their teacher had this capability. There is messaging going out to parents. The principal's been asked to push it. You are going to be asked to push it. There's a parent letter being also printed and mailed. So we are notifying parents every possible way we can. So parents will know these things. But you should be upfront with your kids. And honestly, I think there's a lot of misconception on how off topic our students generally are. That's not what the ETLs are saying, and that's not what we are seeing. I would not be heavy-handed with focus mode very much, because I think a lot of you will cause these unintended consequences. For example, in Ms. Cameron's example, will it block things in the portal? Yes, unless you specifically allow them. So sorry, we're running out of time. We're over, folks, and some of us got to get to the next meeting. So George, if you could just advance to the next slide, or who is ever presenting. We would like to keep going. There you go. It's a little small because of reformat, but as we say at the end of everyone, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and be good to our kids. Thank you so much. Again, you can email edtech@alisal.org with questions, but we strongly encourage you to go to your EdTech liaisons first. They're the ones who now have 3 weeks of experience under their belts. Thank you so much for we were up to 210 at some point, and I think there's probably down to about 185 at this point. 185. So the 185 of you stuck with us. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.